Hello, and welcome back to Nocturne Library. I'm Oliver Marsh, and I'm very glad you're here tonight. Thank you, truly, for making this little corner of the evening part of your nightly routine. Tonight's sleep story, written by Nora Fielding, takes us to a lavender farm in Provence, to a high-drying loft just as dawn begins to gather at the doors. If your mind's been rather busy today, you're in the right place. You'll settle alone beneath old beams and hanging bundles of lavender, with pale morning light slipping across worn floorboards, a soft breeze moving in and out of the open barn doors, and the faint, steady sounds of the farm below drifting up through the wood. A bucket set down somewhere, a swallow turning in the yard, the dry, clean scent of lavender warming gently in the first sun. And if you'd like to support the channel, a quiet like or subscribe does help keep these stories coming. For now, do get yourself properly cozy, let your shoulders drop, and take one slow, easy breath. And when you're ready, we'll begin. Chapter 1. Resting in the lavender loft as dawn opens the barn doors. Cool air moves across your bare forearms before you fully wake, and the boards beneath the hay mattress still carry the night in them, a stored chill under the faint, dry smell of grain and old, sun-baked wood. Above you, the loft doors stand open to the east, already folded back for harvest week as they always are when the sky first pales, and morning light comes through them, passing the hanging lavender, the loft ladder, the zinc water pitcher on its peg, and the chalky blue shutters far below before thinning out across the room. Later, the chapel bell may carry across the fields. For now, you lie where you are, under a sun-faded linen coverlet, and let the barn become clear around you, little by little. The hay mattress gives unevenly under your weight, shaped by use rather than craft, and that is part of its comfort. The straw inside has settled into hollows under your shoulder and hip, the length of your legs. Beneath the linen, your calves feel the retained coolness of dawn. One corner of the coverlet has folded over itself near your waist, making a thicker ridge of cloth there, and your hand can find the softened seam without searching. The fabric has been washed so many times that its weave has loosened into something almost powdery against the skin, and where the air crosses it, it lifts just enough for you to notice the difference between covered warmth and open morning. The loft is high enough above the yard that the first sounds below do not come up sharply. They rise muted through timber and plank and the open square of the ladder well, rounded by distance before they reach you. For a while there is only a faint easing in the chestnut beams overhead, a dry sift of something tiny settling in the rafters, the nearly inaudible stir of lavender stems brushing one another somewhere above your line of sight. When you look upward, you do not have to move much. The bundles hang in long rows from the dark beams, tied at the base with natural jute, each sheaf turned upside down in the airy shade. Even in this first cool hour, before the loft has begun to warm in earnest, the scent is there. Not yet the full sweetness that will come later, but the greener beginning of it. Stem, leaf, the slight bitter brightness that lives under the perfume. The flowers were cut early and hung to dry in moving air. You do not think through the steps in order as instruction. You know them by the smell and spacing overhead. The doors themselves take up much of the eastern wall, broad double leaves opened wide. Through them, dawn is not dramatic. It enters in pale measure. Beyond the threshold, the land near the Plateau de Valensole is still in that first clear interval before colour fully commits itself. The sky has light in it, but only just. The fields beyond the barn are not yet purple or gold or blue in any strong way. They are bands and distances, their edges softened by the angle of the hour. What reaches you first is not the sight of them, but the air that has crossed them, the Mistral-Touched freshness that people here let through the loft as soon as the darkness lifts, because the hanging lavender dries best when the morning passes through before the day grows hot. That current moves over your shoulders and the front of your throat, then along the bare strip of one shin where the coverlet has slipped down. It moves over your skin. At the far side of the loft, near the ladder opening, the zinc pitcher hangs from its peg. In this light it is more shape than shine, a narrow neck and rounded body dimly silvered, but you can already imagine the feel of it if you were to reach for it. The night-cooled metal, the faint smell of well water left in the lip. You do not need it. It is enough that it is there, exactly where it belongs, near the way down and out of your way. The old plank floor extends around your mattress in long boards worn smooth in some places and left rougher in others where the grain has lifted. Between a few of the planks, loose straw has found its way up from beneath, caught there in thin gold threads. The boards hold the smell they always hold at this hour, a dry, baked scent that survives from many afternoons of heat, even now when dawn still lies over them. It mixes with lavender and linen and the faint mineral tang from the pitcher. The smells blend into one familiar loft smell. Below, one of the lower barn windows must already be open behind its shutters. You cannot see the whole wall from where you lie, only an angled portion of the yard beyond the doors, and, lower down, one chalked panel of blue where the paint has faded under years of Provençal sun to something like cornflower dust. The colour sits quietly against the stone. It will become clearer as the light rises. For now, it is enough to know that it is there, that the lower floor and the yard and the first tasks of the day are beginning in their own level beneath yours. A hen calls once from some farther side of the farm, not near enough to be sharp. Then another answers from a different direction, and the two sounds leave a little space after them. The farm is waking below you, but not in any way that presses upward. It comes in layers thin enough to rest inside. The first light on the floor is so pale at first that it looks almost like a change in the wood rather than a beam. It reaches through the open doors in a long horizontal band and lays itself across the nearest boards. Dust motes pass through it only when the air shifts exactly right. Otherwise, it is simply brightness touching grain. The line inches forward so slowly that you notice it only because it eventually finds the edge of a wicker basket near the wall and leaves a narrow strip there brighter than before. After a while, stillness sharpens what you notice. The loft gives itself to you in separate parts. The weight of your head where the mattress dips, the cooler underside of the linen near your wrist, the slight roughness of one straw end pressing through the ticking somewhere under your knee, the breath moving in and out of you with lavender in it. There is no need to improve the position you are in. Your shoulder has found its place. Your legs are heavy in the pleasant way that comes when they have stopped considering movement. Even your hands seem to have settled of their own accord, one under the edge of the coverlet, one resting on top where the air can pass over the knuckles. You become aware of your chest rising under the linen, then lowering again, and of how the scent overhead changes a little on the inward breath. Greener at first, then sweeter on the exhale, as if the loft itself had warmed by a fraction in that time. From somewhere in the yard comes the sound of a wheel turning once over stone or packed earth, then stopping. Not a cart arriving in haste, only a single rounded wooden complaint, and then quiet boards and air again. A little later, a bucket is set down, with one hollow note that travels up through the open doors and fades before it can become interruption. These are not sounds that divide the morning into events. They mark the start of work below. You can imagine the rows beyond the barn, cut early while the stems still hold the night's coolness. You can imagine the sheaves gathered evenly, tied at the base, carried in and raised to the beams. Not because you need a picture to complete the scene, but because the loft still shows the work that happened here. Every knot of jute shows a practiced pull. Work has already happened here, and has now gone still, leaving only odour and scent behind. The air shifts again. One hanging bundle turns slightly on its tie, enough to make a dry brushing sound against its neighbour, and then settles. That small movement changes the fragrance near you. A fresher thread of lavender descends, sharper for a moment, then blends back into the room. You breathe it without trying to name anything in it. Flower, stem, a trace of dust from the loft boards, the clean bitterness of early lavender. Beyond the doors, a swallow passes the opening so quickly that it is almost only a change in the pale air, a dark flick and gone. After it, the quiet seems to deepen rather than break, waiting for the day to gather more fully over them. The light on the floor has lengthened. It no longer touches only the nearest boards. It has crossed a little farther inward, enough that the old grain in the planks begins to show in finer detail where the brightness falls. Narrow lines, knots dark as old tea, the slight cupping at one edge of a board. It reaches toward your mattress in a patient band. Around you, the loft keeps its proportions. Beams above, open doors east, ladder and pitcher behind, boards under everything, lavender suspended in ordered rows, air over skin, linen over legs, scent overhead, a yard below beginning its day without hurry. Then, at last, the first ribbon of sunlight reaches the edge of the coverlet. It touches the faded linen near your ankle, and the cloth there changes from cool dimness to a pale, warming gold. You feel the difference almost before you see it. A small increase of heat through the fabric, no more than the breadth of 2 fingers at first. The rest of you remains in dawn. That one bright strip rests along the fold of the coverlet and stays there, growing clearer as the sun rises beyond the doors. You breathe in the lavender, and the boards beneath you hold steady, and morning continues in the loft. Chapter 2. Breathing the hanging lavender beneath the chestnut beams. You lift your gaze again, and the loft gives you something new to find in the dimmer space above your resting place, where the bundles hang in long, ordered rows from the chestnut beams. A little while ago they were part of the room only as shape and shadow, dusky forms gathered overhead. Now dawn has advanced enough for their colour to begin separating from the wood behind them. The stems are grey-green near the ties, the flower heads deeper, a blue-violet gone muted by the half-light, and each sheaf narrows toward its bound waist where the natural jute circles it once, twice, and knots it firm. They are close enough to feel present above you, yet high enough that they remain part of the loft itself, like the beams, like the boards, like the pale opening of the doors to the east. You do not need to count them, though your eyes could. They hang with the evenness that comes from practiced hands, spaced so air can move between them, each one turned upside down, each one given room. You notice that order without effort. The rows are practical. The scent reaches you in layers that change almost too gradually to name. At first breath it is cool and green, carrying stem and leaf, the sharper edge of cut plants still close to the field. Under that comes the fuller note you know as lavender, though in this hour it has not yet opened all the way. It is cleaner than sweetness at first, cool and sharp, touched by the night air that still lives in the beams and in the shaded corners of the loft. You breathe again, and because you are still, because nothing else presses in, the difference from one breath to the next becomes enough to notice. The warmer strip of light near your ankle has widened by so little that you would not mark it by sight alone, yet the air around the coverlet has changed. Not much, only enough that the flowers begin to release more scent. Their fragrance rounds at the edges. The green remains, but now you catch the exact place where it yields, where the cool, cut stem sharpness loosens and a softer note rises through it. The warming florets release more oil as the loft sheds the last of its stored coolness. For a moment, both are there at once, the living herb of the field, and beneath it, the first sweetness, faint as if warmed between fingers. Above you, the chestnut beams carry their own dry smell, dark and faintly tannic, old wood that has known many seasons of harvest. The bundles hang from them as they have hung every harvest week, tied and lifted into airy shade after the morning cut. That care is visible in the loft even now, in the way no bundle crowds another, in the way the doors were opened as soon as the sky paled, letting the Mistral-Touched air move through before the day grows warmer. The breeze comes in again, not strong enough to disturb your coverlet, only enough to shift what is suspended. You hear the faintest contact of stem against stem overhead, a dry brushing sound so slight it nearly disappears into the wider hush of morning. One bundle near the open doors turns a little on its loop, just a fraction, showing a darker side that had been in shadow. It rotates, pauses, and if it does, whether it will release more green stem scent or more sweetness. The bundle eases back and settles, leaving behind a new strand of fragrance, briefly richer where the flowers have stirred. You follow that new thread as if it were visible. It comes down through the warmer air by the doors and across the loft where you lie, mingling with the smell of old planks and the faint grain sweetness that rises through the boards from the straw tucked below. The lavender changes as it travels. Near the beams it is drier, more concentrated. Lower down it mixes with linen and wood and morning air until it becomes part of the whole place, not one thing apart from another. You notice too how the stems are gathered. Even from below you can see where the cut ends have been aligned by hand before tying, the sheaves made neat without fuss. There is care in work done this way, not hurried, not ornamental, simply exact enough that the plants can finish becoming what they are meant to become. Here, under the roof, in shade and draught, they can dry slowly, keeping what matters. The thought drifts through you and passes. You do not need to hold on to it. The bundles overhead make that plain. Nothing in them is forced. The flowers release themselves by degrees. The room warms by degrees. Your own breathing falls into that same measure. One breath receiving the greener edge, the next receiving more of the sweetness beneath. For a while, you simply lie under them and breathe. It is enough to feel how the scent gathers more fully on the inward breath and thins on the outward one. Enough to notice that the coolest air still lives near the ladder opening behind you and in the deeper shade along the wall, while the broad doors admit a milder current from the fields. Enough to sense the difference between the flowers nearest the open loft and those farther in, where the air is steadier and the fragrance keeps closer to the beams before drifting down. When you were first aware of the lavender on waking, it seemed to fill the loft all at once. Now it separates into many small truths. The tied jute has its own dry fibre smell if the breeze shifts just right. The stems smell faintly dusty where the cut surfaces have begun to cure. The flower heads carry the clearest note, and even among them there are variations, some greener, some almost honeyed already, depending on how the air has moved around them, depending on how the first warmth has reached them. The rows nearest the centre of the loft remain dimmer, their colour still pooled in shadow. The ones closer to the doors catch more light along their lower edges. You can see where the pale bands from outside stop short of the beams and leave the upper wood dark. In that contrast, the bundles seem suspended between night and day, their tips touched first, their tied waists still in shade. It pleases the eye in the same way that the first warmth on the linen pleased your skin. Not because it is dramatic, but because it arrives so clearly in one place before another. Below, the farm is still mostly a background of distance and timber, but the loft itself carries signs of recent work. The lavender above you has not been hanging here long enough to lose the memory of the field. There is still freshness in it, still the cool cut smell of morning harvest. You imagine the rows beyond the barn near the Plateau de Valensole, the plants clipped while the air was early and the light low. The sheaves built evenly in arms and baskets, then brought in before the stronger sun could begin to draw too much from them. The care of that sequence remains in the room now. You can smell it. Another breath comes through the doors, cleaner this time, touched by open field and stone and the last trace of night. It passes through the hanging rows and returns altered, carrying a little more of the flowers with it. The loft air holds several scents at once, moving over one another without haste. Cool air first, then herb, then the faint sweetness beginning to deepen. Your chest rises under the linen. Your shoulders stay loose against the mattress. The hay beneath you gives in the same places it gave before, familiar and untroubled. You could close your eyes and know the bundles were still there from the way the air arrives. Even without looking, you would sense the height of them above you, the slight drag they put on the breeze, the way scent descends after a movement among the stems. So you let your lids lower for a few breaths. At once the fragrance feels nearer, because sight no longer shares your attention. The greener edge comes first, a little briskness at the top of the breath. Then the body recognizes the deeper note beneath it and settles more heavily into the mattress. The sweetness is still restrained, not yet the full, warm perfume it will become later in the morning, but it has begun. It arrives at a single turning point you can feel more than name. The sharp leaf scent thins, opens, and in the same breath becomes rounder, fuller, almost creamy without losing its dryness. The green note gives way to sweetness there, not by vanishing, but by letting something velvety come through it. When you open your eyes again, the same bundle near the doors has shifted once more, barely at all. Its stems brush the bundle beside it, and a few tiny grains loosen from the flower heads and fall through the light, too small to follow for long. They disappear before they reach the floor, but you know where they will land. On the old boards, on a basket rim, in the creases where dust and chaff gather. Fallen lavender has scented the planks for years. The chestnut beam above that turning bundle shows its age in the worn places where cord has rested season after season. The wood there is polished darker by use, not by shine, but by touch, by weight, by repetition. You notice how natural that seems. Nothing here has been arranged for display. The jute is tied because it must hold. The flowers hang because this is how they dry best. Even your place on the hay mattress feels part of the same plain logic. A loft catches air, and air keeps the room cool, and a mattress laid under the open doors receives the first warmth of day. The smell deepens another degree. You do not have to search for the change. It comes on its own, as the sun inches farther outside and the loft answers. The lavender overhead begins to smell less like cut stems and more like itself. Not stronger in a blunt way, but more complete. The sweetness no longer hides beneath the green. It stands beside it. The two notes travel together now, one fresh and herbal, one rounder and almost velvety, though the flowers themselves remain dry to the eye. You breathe that in and let it go again. The bundle by the doors is still now. The rows have settled back into their ordered quiet. Above them, the chestnut beams keep their dark line across the roof. Beneath them, the air continues its slow exchange, entering cool from outside, moving among stem and flower, descending warmer by small degrees into the loft where you rest. Nothing alters quickly. The fragrance opens, the light widens. Your breathing matches both without trying. And then the breeze touches the turning bundle once more. It gives only the slightest sway, but this time what comes free is different. Not the greener edge, not the dry stem, but a deeper floral thread, warmer and newly sweetened, descending through wood-cool air. Chapter 3. the linen coverlet, hay mattress, and warm boards under morning light. And as the morning goes on entering the barn, the lavender above you keeps releasing more scent. Beneath that slow change, you become aware again of what is nearest. Not the doors, not the beams, not even the hanging bundles first, but the plain comfort under you and over you. The linen coverlet lies across your body with the light weight of cloth that has been washed many times and dried in sun until every stiffness has left it. Its faded colour is hard to name in this hour, somewhere between cream and pale oat, with places worn finer than others. It rests over your chest and stomach, over your hips and thighs, and falls in a loose fold along one shin where the breeze from the open doors can find it. Under the coverlet, the hay mattress gives way without dropping. It has the firm give of country bedding, enough spring in it to meet your shoulder blades and the back of your knees, enough softness to take the shape of your weight and then stop there. You feel the hay packed inside the ticking in broad, forgiving layers, not lumpy, not exact, only settled by many mornings and nights into something dependable. When you let your head sink a fraction more, the mattress receives that too. A little more of your neck loosens, your back settles more fully. The loft floor under everything has its own presence, steady and dry. Old planks run lengthwise through the barn, their grain darkened by years, their surface worn smoother in some places than in others. Even from where you lie, without touching them directly, you can feel their nearness through the mattress. A level strength, old repairs keeping company with older wood, all holding to the same patient task. Beneath them, loose straw has been tucked into gaps and corners, and from below that rises the faint smell of grain and old heat, dusty in the best way, like a loft that has known many harvests. You breathe in, and along with the lavender there comes that dry sweetness of wood and old straw and warm dust not yet warmed all the way through. It makes the loft feel more lived in, more ordinary, and because of that, more restful. Nothing here presses itself forward. The coverlet rests where it rests. The mattress holds. The boards smell of grain and old heat. A pale band of sunlight has reached farther in while you have been lying still. At first it only touched the edge of the linen. Now it lies across the coverlet in a long slant, so light in colour that you notice it less by brightness than by warmth beginning. The part of the coverlet under that band feels drier, almost crisp at the surface, though when you shift your attention below it there is still coolness held in the folds. The morning does not warm everything at once. It chooses in strips and inches. One shoulder receives it first. Not heat, not yet. Only the first clear difference between shade and sun. Through the linen of your shirt, or directly over skin where the coverlet has slipped back, the light settles on the top of your shoulder and stays there. The coolness that had been even across you all dawn is interrupted by that one narrow place of warmth. You notice how quickly the body recognizes such a small change. Your shoulder loosens first. A muscle near the collarbone lets go. Your arm grows heavier against the mattress. The warmth does not stop at the skin. It seems to press you more gently downward, warming the top of your shoulder. The breeze still moves through the loft in long passes from the open doors, and where it crosses the new warmth on your skin, it creates a finer sensation than either one alone. Warmth from above, moving coolness over it, then warmth again. The contrast is slight, but exact. You could follow it for a long while without tiring of it. Overhead, the lavender hangs in ordered rows from the dark beams, and the sun has begun to find the lower edges of some bundles. Their colour remains muted in the shade, but where light touches them, the flower heads show a dusty blue-violet under the grey. A few wicker baskets farther in catch the same pale bars across their rims. The floor between them is striped now. Board, light, board, light. You do not need to move to know where the sun is traveling. It tells you by touch. After your shoulder, one calf begins to warm where the coverlet has fallen away enough for the light to find bare skin. The sensation is so gradual that for a few breaths you are not sure whether it is happening. And then the answer is there. Yes, here too. The calf that had felt almost cool against the morning air now carries a mild, stored heat. Your foot remains in shade. Your knee is half in one world and half in the other. You can track the light by where it warms you. The hay beneath your calves presses back with a dry resilience. You can feel individual stems only in the broadest way, not as points, but as the faintly springing body of the mattress under its cover. It gives just enough to hold the shape of your legs. Another inch of light reaches the boards beside the mattress, and the wood answers with a tiny sound. Just a creak, small and low, but distinct enough to turn the hour. The plank warms and creaks. For a moment, the sound seems to travel through the mattress as much as through the air, so that you feel it near your hip and lower back, before stillness gathers again. Sun on wood, wood answering, and then the quiet after it feels deeper, as if the loft has settled more fully around you. The boards beside the mattress hold the next reach of light. In the brighter strips, the grain stands out in long lines and knots, honey-coloured where the sun catches, darker where old use has rubbed in. In the shaded strips, they keep their dawn coolness. If you were to slide your hand down from the mattress and place your palm flat there, you know what you would feel. One board cool at the fingertips, the next already warming near the centre. A faint roughness where the grain lifts, and dust so fine it would barely mark the skin. But you do not need to test it. Knowing is enough. The warmth has already told you where the boards are changing. Your body has begun to take their measure from above. Shoulder warmed, calf warmed, lower side still cool where the mattress keeps the night a little longer. The linen over your middle has warmed too, though more slowly than your shoulder. It lies over your ribs with a softened weight, moving only a little when you breathe. Inhale, and the cloth rises in a small hill. Exhale, and it settles back into the shape it had just learned. The motion becomes simpler the longer you stay with it. Breath, cloth, hay, boards. Above them, lavender and beams. Beyond them, the open doors and the clear morning over the fields near the Plateau de Valensole. The layers stay simple. Cloth, hay, boards, lavender, air. From below comes a muted sound from the yard, far enough softened by timber and height that it arrives as texture more than event. Perhaps a wheel turning once over packed earth, perhaps a hand setting something down and then moving away. It does not draw you outward for long. The farm has begun to use the morning, but up here the body remains the truest measure of passing time. Shoulder warmer than before, calf warmer than before, the boards beside you carrying a little more heat than they held at first light. The scent in the loft changes with these same increments. Earlier, the lavender had a greener edge, cool and silvery, almost sharp where the stems had been cut and gathered into sheaves in the morning hours before hanging. Now, with the light extending over the lower bundles and the air losing some of its night chill, the sweetness comes forward. Not stronger all at once, broader perhaps, rounder. The floral note opens while the dry stem smell stays underneath, and the old grain scent from the boards steadies both of them. You breathe that mixture in and feel it settle through your chest more completely than thought. A fold of the coverlet near your hip slides the slightest bit as your body eases deeper into the mattress. That is all the movement there is, and even that is less a change of position than a final admitting of weight. You are not arranging yourself now. You are being carried by what is beneath you. The hay has already found the places that need support. The linen has already softened where it touches your skin. The boards have already taken the measure of the mattress and kept it level. There is nothing left to improve. Sunlight reaches farther over the floor, and one of the baskets near the wall shows its woven pattern more clearly. Each reed edge picked out in pale gold before the brightness thins again. A hanging bundle turns almost imperceptibly in the moving air and then is still. Dust motes pass through one bright strip and vanish when they cross into shade. The chestnut beams overhead remain dark, but even they begin to show a warmer tone where the light glances along one side. Your lower back settles another fraction into the hay. The place between your shoulder blades broadens against the mattress. If there had been any need to keep yourself slightly gathered, slightly alert to the loft around you, that need has gone. The barn has become known enough through touch. By now you feel the day on your skin, in the cloth over your knees, in the boards easing under warmth, in the smell rising from wood and straw and drying flowers. Little by little, the warmth lays claim to you. Shoulder, ribs, calf, the edge of one hip under linen, each place received without effort. For a while, you notice only these gradual exchanges. Air over the warmed shoulder, sun on the calf, linen across the stomach, the faint, dry smell from the planks, lavender overhead turning sweeter as the loft warms. Another tiny creak from farther off, perhaps near the doors this time, where the first brighter light has reached the threshold boards. Then quiet again, broad and ordinary. If you open your eyes, the pale bands are longer than before. If you close them, you can still tell where they lie. That is the pleasure of this hour in the loft. The world becomes readable through contact. You do not have to follow every sound below or every shift of brightness above. The body reads enough. Warm here, cool there. Cloth lifting with breath. Hay giving and keeping. Wood storing the sun little by little. And under all of it, a deepening ease that comes not from drifting away from the place, but from settling more fully into it, until linen, straw, boards, light, and your own resting weight fit together without effort at all. Chapter 4. Looking down to the blue shutters and the quiet farmyard below. That deepening ease remains with you as your attention drifts outward a little, not because you choose to follow anything, but because the loft is open and the morning reaches in from more than one direction. You stay where you are on the hay mattress, the linen lying light across you, one shoulder warmer than it was, one calf still touched by the cooler air that comes through the doors. Above, the bundles hang in ordered rows from the dark beams. Around you, the boards keep their dry grain smell, and beyond the edge of your resting place, beyond the pale bands of light on the floor, the barn begins to show more of what lies below it. From here, without lifting more than your gaze, you can look through the breadth of the open loft and let your sight fall downward toward the lower part of the barn. The windows beneath wear their old blue shutters, the paint long since changed by sun and weather into that chalky cornflower tone that belongs to this region as naturally as limestone and dry grass. They are not bright in the hard way of fresh colour. They have gone powdery with years, softened by many summers, as if the blue has been sifted with dust and light until it rests easily against the stone. You notice how well that faded blue sits under the lavender above. The hanging sheaves are still mostly in shadow, their flower heads dimmed to dusky violet, their stems grey-green and pale at the cut ends. The shutters below answer them in another register, more weathered, more earthly, less fragrant, but part of the same morning arrangement. The barn wall below the loft opening has its own early colour too. Cream stone, old mortar, a little roughness where repairs were made long ago and have since become ordinary. The shutters break that pale wall into rectangles of blue, and the iron hinges, darkened with age, make thin marks beside them. Nothing down there is polished. Wood has dried where the sun has found it year after year. Paint has thinned. Stone has stored coolness through the night and is only now beginning to release it. A sound rises from the yard, so modest that at first it is almost part of the boards settling around you. The slow complaint of a wheel turning somewhere below, not near enough to be sharp, not heavy enough to disturb the stillness overhead. Perhaps a cart is being drawn a short distance across the yard, or turned by hand against the packed earth and stone. You hear one portion of the motion more clearly than the rest. A brief wooden roll, a muted scrape, then nothing. It is enough to picture a wheel rim carrying a little dust on it, enough to imagine a shaft being steadied by someone you do not see, enough to suggest work already underway below. The sound leaves behind a small curiosity, gentle as the air in the loft. Not a question that presses, only the sense of activity continuing just out of sight. The sounds reach you softened by timber and height. Whatever happens below arrives thinned by open air, timber and height, until it becomes almost intimate in its distance, the outline of a life rather than its full weight. Farther away, hens sound from somewhere beyond the immediate yard, their voices thin with distance, not the bright clatter they will have later when the day is fully up, but a looser scattering of notes. You hear one, then another, and then a brief little chorus that dissolves before it gathers into anything insistent. The sound reaches the loft after crossing open ground. It arrives altered by space, more like faint calls on the air. You picture them without effort. Birds stepping through dust or straw, necks dipping, wings tucked close. Somewhere below the shutters and beyond the strip of yard you can see, they are already busy with their own first errands, before the scent of lavender draws close again. A current of air enters by the open doors and moves through the loft in a long, clean ribbon. It touches the skin of your forearm, then crosses your neck, then slips under the edge of the linen where it lies over your shin. The coverlet does not lift much, only loosens slightly against you and settles back. Above, one or two bundles answer with the faintest dry stir. The fragrance changes with that movement. What was warm and floral a moment ago carries a greener thread again, as if the breeze has passed through deeper layers of stem and leaf before reaching you. Below, the shutters keep their powder blue calm against the wall. One of them is pulled open farther than the others, and from this angle you can see the darkness of the lower interior behind it, cool and still compared with the yard outside. Pale stone, faded blue, then a depth of shade. Yet the shade seems less empty now. It holds the possibility of someone passing through it, of a hand on a latch, of some ordinary purpose moving between shadow and sun. The farmyard itself appears in fragments from up here. You do not see all of it, only enough. A strip of stone, a patch of packed earth beyond, the edge of a trough, the worn curve where wheels have crossed the same place many times. A little farther out, brightness begins where the open yard catches more of the sun. The light there is stronger than the pale bands inside the loft, though not yet hot. It lies on the ground in broadening planes, picking out the chalk in the stone and the dust at the edges. Another sound comes, this time so slight you almost take it for memory. The soft knock of wood against wood. Perhaps a handle shifted. Perhaps a gate eased back into place. Then, after a pause, the wheel again, only a little, as if whatever is being moved has reached the spot where it belongs. The motion ends. In the pause that follows, someone is still moving just out of sight. Then comes the hollow note of a bucket set down on stone. It is one sound, rounded and plain, with the brief ring zinc or tin gives when it meets a hard surface and settles at once. After it, the yard is quiet again, and because the sound is so exact, your mind can rest in it for a moment. You can almost feel the shape of the vessel from the note alone, its handle tipped aside, its base finding the flatness of the paving, the little after vibration fading into morning air. It does not suggest haste. No one has dropped anything. No one calls out. A pail has simply been placed where it needs to be, and then the stillness closes neatly around the act. The sound seems to gather the other fragments around it. Wheel, wood, hens. A yard with someone or something moving through it in the calm, practiced way mornings are begun. You do not need to know more than that. The bucket has made the unseen below feel nearer, not intrusive, only present, like a life continuing under your rest with room enough for both. The smell of the boards rises a little as the light advances. Dry pine and chestnut, old dust, a trace of straw in the cracks. It mingles with the lavender until the two are hard to separate. When another brief farm sound reaches you, it seems to arrive through that mixture, carrying with it a sense of place more than any message. Blue shutters under a loft full of drying stems, a bucket on stone under a bed of hay and linen, hens across the yard under the same widening sky. The mattress keeps its forgiving shape under your hips and shoulders. The boards under that remain solid and sun-scented. The warmer strip of light has moved a little farther across the floor beside you, and though it has not yet reached every part of the loft, it has begun to gather the room into a clearer whole. You can see more now of the baskets set near the wall, their wicker pale where it has dried and dark where shadow still catches in the weave. You can see dust in the grain of the threshold boards by the doors. You can see the lower shutters more distinctly too, their edges a little worn, their paint rubbed thin where hands have touched them over years of opening and closing. That wear has its own modest beauty. Below, a hen calls once, nearer than before, then gives up the thought. Somewhere farther out, another answers. The exchange is brief and untidy in the way birds often are, and because it is brief, the space after it feels larger. The yard returns to its sparse morning sounds, a movement too distant to name, the smallest scrape, then air again. Whoever is working below remains out of sight.
The shutters remain in view, and your gaze returns to them more than once. Perhaps because colour at this hour is so measured. The blue is not trying to be vivid. It has been reduced by years into something almost chalk-like, and for that reason it sits more deeply in the scene. It belongs to stone and weather now. It belongs to this barn. If the paint were fresh, you would notice it as paint. As it is, you notice only the shutters themselves, as settled in their place as the beams above you or the pitcher by the ladder. Another breeze passes through. It cools the side of your face that is turned toward the opening and leaves the other side warm. Somewhere overhead, dry stems touch and part. The scent that falls from them is fuller than it was when dawn first entered the loft, though it still carries enough freshness to keep the air clear. Beneath that fragrance, beneath the wood and hay, the yard continues in its own restrained way. A final small sound reaches you before your attention closes again around the loft. Not the bucket this time, not the wheel, but the faint, shifting scatter of feet below, too indistinct to belong to any one creature for certain. Hens, perhaps. Someone crossing the yard, a stable animal adjusting its stance out of sight. The sound is over almost before it arrives. What remains is the sense of life continuing under the loft in low, ordinary motions. And because it continues so steadily,
your awareness can settle back without losing anything. The shutters are still there in their faded blue. The yard is still receiving the first uses of the day. The bucket is where it was set down. The wheel has come to rest. Above all of it, you remain on the hay mattress under the linen, with the lavender hanging in ordered rows, and the morning air moving through the open doors, carrying up from below just enough of the farm to make the loft feel connected to the yard below. Chapter 5. The zinc water pitcher by the loft ladder in the cool, early air. And because the loft is placed above the first uses of the day, your attention can drift downward without your body following it. You remain where you are on the hay mattress, one shoulder warmed by the widening stripe of sun, one leg still touched by the cooler air that comes in through the open doors. Overhead, the hanging lavender has begun to smell less green than it did at first light. The sweetness has not fully opened yet, but it is there now, threading through the dry scent of boards and straw. From where you lie, the ladder opening is only part of the room, another shape among beams and baskets, and the pale fold of linen over your middle. Yet after a while, your awareness settles there. Not because knowing demands it, only because the loft holds its temperatures unevenly, and the space by the ladder keeps the night a little longer. The difference is slight, though your skin notices it at once. Near the doors, the air is already changing. Across your forearm, where the coverlet has slipped back, the warmth comes and goes in narrow bands as the sun reaches farther over the planks. But near the ladder, where the boards fall away into the square dark of the opening, the air remains cooler, touched by stone below and by the shaded centre of the barn. If you were to stretch your foot that way, you imagine the soles of your feet would feel the change before the rest of you did. Warm boards under one heel, then a cooler patch, then the old descending breath that rises from lower rooms before the day has had time to settle into them. Beside that opening, on its peg, hangs the zinc pitcher. You noticed it earlier as part of the loft's familiar order, no more remarkable than the ladder itself or the knots in the beams. But the longer you rest, the more natural it seems there. Not on a table, not carried from place to place, not brought in with ceremony. Simply on its peg by the ladder, where a hand can reach it without searching, a vessel for well water before the heat has fully entered the day. Even from here you can picture the shape of it clearly enough. The narrow neck, the curved handle, the slight flare at the lip where water pours in a clean arc if the wrist tips just so. The metal is not bright. Years of use have dimmed it to a pale, weathered sheen, and the places most often touched have taken on a smoother look, as if hands have polished them without meaning to. In this light, the pitcher does not shine so much as gather what little brightness reaches it and return it softly. At dawn, it would still be cold to the touch. You know that without rising. The metal keeps the night longer than wood does. If your fingers closed around the handle now, they would meet that stored chill first, then the faint dampness left by air moving over cool zinc. And if you brought the lip near your face, there would be that unmistakable scent of water drawn from a well. Mineral, clear, touched by metal but not spoiled by it, carrying something of stone and depth and shaded places. The thought of water comes without thirst. That is part of what settles you. You do not need to drink. Nothing in you is urgent. Yet knowing the water is there changes the room. It lets you imagine, before any dryness arrives, the cool edge at the lip, the brief weight of a sip held in the mouth, the quiet pleasure of relief already waiting in its place. By the doors, the air is turning warm. By the ladder, the pitcher keeps company with what remains cool. The contrast makes the water seem nearer than the distance across the loft. Below the opening, the lower barn remains mostly out of sight, but not out of reach of the ear. A sound rises now and then from beneath you, softened by timber and distance. A footstep crossing stone, the brief wooden complaint of something shifted and set right. Hens farther off in the yard, their calls thinned by the open morning. None of it reaches up sharply. The ladder links the loft to the lower barn, and the square of shadow around it keeps those sounds rounded. almost shaped by the dark before they arrive. You think of the ladder not as a route you ought to take, only as part of the loft's structure, as ordinary as the chestnut beams above or the old boards beneath the mattress. The rungs have been climbed so often that each one would know the exact place of a foot, if wood could know such things. But instead of saying that, you simply notice how the grain must be worn smoother in the middle, how a palm would find the side rail without searching. It joins the resting place above to the waking farm below, and because it is there, the loft does not feel cut off. It feels connected in the plainest possible way. A little more air moves through the open doors. It passes first through the rows of hanging lavender, stirring one bundle just enough to turn it a fraction before it settles back among the others. Then it crosses the room, warmed a little by the boards near the doors, still cool where the centre remains shaded. By the ladder it catches the pitcher lightly. The metal gives the faintest tap against the wall. The sound is so small it might almost be missed. Yet it enters the stillness with a distinctness larger things do not have. Not a clang, not even a knock. A brief, clear touch of zinc against plaster or wood. You hear it, and then hear the space after it. And for a few breaths, the loft seems to hold itself listening. The distance from the warm doors to the cool ladder-side opening feels suddenly traced and made audible. Then quiet again. The coverlet lies over your hips and thighs with the familiar weight of sun-softened linen. Under your shoulder blades, the hay mattress gives in the same settled places it has given before. The straw inside pressed flatter in some parts, springier in others. Through the thin layer of linen beneath you and through the mattress itself, there is still that faint scent of old grain and dry stems stored in the planks below. The smells layer together: lavender, old boards, straw, cool metal. Near the doors, the day is moving toward warmth. Near the ladder, the cool remains. Between them, where you rest, the loft holds both at once. You become aware of that balance more fully than of any single object. Sun on the boards to your right, a shaded pocket by the opening to your left. Air crossing from east to west in long, clean passes. The pitcher hanging in the cooler part of the room. The mattress receiving your weight without shift or complaint. It is enough to know where things are in relation to one another. The room gathers itself that way, by placement, by old habits of harvest mornings, repeated until they no longer need explanation. During harvest week, the loft doors are opened as soon as the sky pales, so the Mistral-Touched air can pass through the hanging sheaves before the day grows hot. You felt that custom already in the first coolness across your arms and calves, and now you feel another part of the same knowledge in the pitcher by the ladder. Air for the drying lavender, water kept in the cooler part of the loft, shade preserved where it can be preserved, warmth admitted where it does good. The bundles overhead continue to breathe out their changing scent. Earlier it held more of cut stem and field edge, silver green and almost sharp. Now, as the sunlight reaches farther into the loft, the flowers begin to release the fuller perfume kept in them. Not all at once. The sweetness gathers in small increments, and because it does, you can notice the cooler smell near the ladder all the more clearly by contrast. Zinc, well water, shaded wood, the faint chalkiness of the wall. Your mouth may not be dry, but the idea of a sip forms with pleasing exactness. You can almost feel the shape of it. Cool water poured from the pitcher into a cup or raised directly in a practiced hand. The first contact at the lips, the metallic edge of the vessel cool and smooth. Then the water itself, colder than the room, carrying down through the throat a trace of stone. The pleasure of it lies not in need, but in knowing it is there already, waiting in the cool part of the loft while the door-side air slowly warms. It belongs to the same order as the folded linen, the hung lavender, the tools set aside after the morning cut. What is needed has a place.
Below, a board or stall door shifts and settles. Then a pause. Then a lower sound, almost too soft to distinguish. Perhaps the movement of an animal in its standing place, or a hand brushing dust from cloth. You do not try to decide. The sounds remain below you, absorbed by distance, and the ladder opening frames them into something smaller before they reach the loft. The blue shutters you noticed before are on the outer wall beneath you, their chalky cornflower paint faded by years of Provençal sun. You cannot see them from where your attention rests now, but you remember their colour and the way the light had found their worn edges. It belongs to the same calm usefulness as the picture, paint laid on years ago, weathered into softness, still doing its work. The farm keeps many things past their first brightness: linen, wood, zinc, wicker, shutters, rope. Not out of reluctance, only because use wears objects into a kind of rightness. Another current of air enters through the doors and travels the length of the loft. This time you feel it first at your bare ankle, then under the loose edge of the coverlet, then over the back of your hand where it lies outside the linen. By the time it reaches the ladder, it has passed through lavender and over warm boards, carrying both scents with it into the cooler pocket there. Again the picture stirs, though more lightly than before, only enough that you can imagine the handle shifting on its peg. You remain where you are. That matters in its own way. The farm below has already begun, with its bucket set down in the yard, its wheel briefly turned, its first motions passing upward in softened fragments. Yet none of these things presses against your stillness. They simply exist around it, making the loft feel provisioned, connected, complete. A little more sunlight reaches across the planks near the centre of the room. The warm stripe on your shoulder broadens. The cooler air by the ladder remains intact, a shaded reserve held a while longer in the barn's middle. In that quiet geography, your body can rest without choosing one over the other. If your breathing deepens, the lavender comes in sweeter. If your attention drifts toward the opening, the thought of water returns with its clean mineral edge and the imagined coolness waiting at the lip. If it drifts back toward the doors, there is sun on linen and the brightness beyond. The picture hangs where it has always hung. The ladder descends into the dim below. Overhead, the sheaves remain in ordered rows, their tied stems dark against the beams. The old boards keep their dry grain smell under the growing perfume of lavender. And you lie between cool and warm, between loft and yard, aware of the water near at hand without any need to reach for it, while the morning continues to spread through the barn, one measured breath at a time. Chapter 6. The Sickle and Wicker Harvest Basket. Resting after the morning cut, from where you lie, the loft is fully in mourning now. The open doors to the east, the long boards under the mattress, the hanging rows above, the cooler pocket of air near the ladder, and the widening warmth nearer the light. You do not need to turn your head far to notice what has been resting against the wall since the first cutting ended. The long-handled sickle and the wicker hottie beside it, both set down where they belong. The sickle lies with its handle along the boards and its curved billhook blade turned inward, where no passing sleeve or bare ankle would meet it by accident. Even from here you can make out the shape of it, the smooth, worn shaft, darkened by hands and use, and the hooked metal at the end, dulled not by neglect, but by work already done. It looks like what it is here, a farm tool cleaned by habit,
put aside after the cool first hours, at rest now in the same barn air as the lavender and straw. The basket beside it is taller than it first seemed, a back basket plaited from wicker, broad through the middle and narrowing toward the base, made to ride against a harvester's back and then be lowered off again when the carrying is finished. From your place on the hay mattress, you see the curve of its rim and the softened colour of the weave, sun-browned in places, pale where hands have rubbed it smooth over years. One strap has slumped against its side, the other catches a line of light and shows the slight shine of use where leather has bent and bent again, where a shoulder bore its weight and then was relieved of it. It is easy to imagine the first part of the morning without leaving your blanket of stillness. Before the loft doors stood open, before the pale sun reached the floorboards, the cut would already have begun out in the rows. The tools tell you enough. Stems gathered, cut clean in the cool, tied, carried up here into shade. Now the sheaves hang clear of one another beneath the chestnut beams, and the empty basket leans against the wall. Nothing in the loft hurries that order. It is all visible at once. The bundles overhead in their rows, the old basket that carried them, the sickle set down after its share of the work, and you under the linen coverlet while the morning continues to broaden. The farm below has already done what it needed to do for these first hours. That is part of what settles you further. The labour nearest dawn is over for now. Now the lavender only needs air and time. A thread of air comes through the open doors and moves along the boards, cool first where it passes the ladder opening, then warmer where it crosses the strip of sun. The lavender overhead answers with the faintest rustle, more a change in texture than a sound. Near the wall, the basket keeps its shape in shadow. The sickle's metal catches one narrow glint and lets it go again as the light shifts by a finger's width. You find yourself looking at the handle more than the blade. Wood keeps the memory of hands differently than metal does. The shaft has been polished where palms slide and tighten, where the tool is lifted, angled, lowered again. There are places where the grain has darkened with sweat and weather and oil from skin, and places nearer the end where it stays rougher, less often touched. The handle is polished where hands have gripped it. Someone has reached for this same handle in dim mornings many times, not thinking of the handle itself, only of the stems before them and the basket waiting to be filled before the day grows hot. The basket shows the same wear. Its rim is worn smooth where fingers have caught it to steady a load. The wicker along one side has a slight flattening where it must have rested against a back again and again. The strap, shining in the light, has the softened bend of leather shaped by a shoulder, by the pull of weight, by the easy, practiced motion of lifting it on and slipping it off. Even the weave seems to remember pressure. The push of cut stems, the brush of sleeves, the brief press of a hand checking what remained inside before the basket was set down.
That steadiness reaches you without asking anything back. You remain where you are, one shoulder warmed by the sun that has advanced a little farther over the linen, one calf still aware of the cooler stream moving in from the doors. Under the coverlet, the hay mattress gives in its familiar way, firm and springy at once. Beneath that, the old planks hold their dry grain smell, and under the grain smell the loft keeps its mixture of straw dust, timber and lavender beginning to sweeten. The hot leans at a slight angle, enough for you to see into it. Not much remains inside. Most of what it carried now hangs above you in ordered rows. But a few loosened grains of lavender have fallen and gathered in the basket's bottom, among tiny flecks of leaf and dust from the cut. As the air warms, those grains begin to release themselves more fully. Their scent rises from the wicker in little stored pockets, sharper and more intimate than the loft's larger perfume. Green first, then floral, then warm with
with a faint, honeyed depth that seems to have been waiting for the light to find it. That small remainder holds your attention more than a full basket might have done. It is not the brightness of the field anymore, not the whole fresh armful with sap at the cut ends and crushed leaf on the fingers. It is what is left after carrying, the few fallen bits, the fragrance caught in wicker, the sweetness deepening as the basket warms. A few grains still hold the scent of the field. Each passing drift of air loosens it again, and the scent comes fuller now, dry and rich and unmistakably persistent. Below, somewhere beyond the ladder opening, a muted sound rises and disappears. A footstep on packed earth, perhaps, or a gate eased into place. It does not disturb the loft, it only places the tools more clearly in your mind. They have not been abandoned. They have been put down because this part of the work is finished for the moment. The same practiced hands that cut the rows and tied the sheaves have reached this wall and left these things exactly where they should be found later. You can almost follow the sequence in the arrangement. Basket first, perhaps, lowered from the back and set against the wall. Then the sickle laid down beside it with the blade turned in. Such movements become so familiar on a farm that they scarcely need thought. Yet the result is not tidiness for its own sake, but care. Care for the next hand, the next passing body, the next hour when the tool will be needed again. Care lingering after effort, visible in the angle of the blade, the slack strap, the basket resting upright. The loft itself supports that order. The chestnut beams overhead are dark and dry, strong enough to carry row after row of hanging sheaves. The open doors let the Mistral-Touched air move through before the day grows warm. The shade keeps the flowers from bleaching. Even the boards, old as they are, offer enough breadth along the wall for tools to lie flat and out of the way. You can feel how long this has been done here, only as the shape the work naturally takes in this place. Another current of air crosses the room. The nearest bundle turns the slightest amount on its jute tie and settles. In the basket below, one or two loose florets shift against the wicker with a sound too light to call a sound at all. Still, you sense it. The scent lifts almost at once, richer for a breath, and then richer still as the sun reaches lower across the basket's side, warming the cane and the few grains gathered in its bottom. What rises now is sweeter and rounder as the basket warms. Your eyes drift from the basket to the hanging rows and back. Above, the lavender is already changing with the temperature. Earlier it held more of the cut stem and leaf, that cool silver-green note of dawn. Now the sweetness comes forward in layers. It gathers under the beams, in the folds of the linen near your chest, in the warmed strip of air over the boards. The tools below those bundles seem to belong to the same slow transformation. Their work was done in the field while the air was cold enough to carry effort lightly. Now they rest in the drying loft, while what they gathered gives itself over to warmth and time. The blade's curve is beautiful in a practical way, made for reach and clean movement through stems. No brightness flashes from it, only a subdued sheen where the metal has been honed and used. Dust has already settled along one edge of the shaft. A grain of straw lies near the handle. Nothing about it strains toward the next task, and because it does not, you do not either. The thought passes through you almost without words. The tools are enough evidence that the morning has begun properly below and out in the rows. The sheaves overhead are enough evidence that the harvest has already entered its next stage. You are not needed to complete any part of it. The farm has gone on around your resting, and that fact eases you more deeply into the mattress. Sunlight reaches a little farther across the floor and brushes the lower edge of the basket. The wicker brightens where the pale band touches it, making each strand easier to see, the over-under pattern, the slight flattening where weight has pressed over time, the tiny breaks in the outer skin of the cane. The warmed wicker gives off its own scent, dry and faintly sweet, close to hay but cleaner. Mixed with the loose lavender grains inside, it makes a fragrance like a field gathered and brought under cover, then left in peace. You breathe it in without trying to separate one note from another. Lavender, wicker, old wood, straw, cool metal from the pitcher by the ladder still somewhere in the background of the air. The loft has become fuller since dawn, but not crowded. Each smell keeps its place. Each object keeps its place. Even the sounds below seem to know their own distance. If you were to rise, which you do not, you would pass near the tools and see more. The notch where the sickle's handle meets the iron collar, the dust in the basket's weave, the lavender bloom caught in the curve of the rim. But distance is enough. Rest gives things their own outline. From here, the sickle and hot are not tasks. They show the work is done for now. The breeze enters once more, less cool now than it was at first light. It travels over your forearm above the coverlet, across your throat, through the stems overhead, and down to the wall where the basket stands. Again, the lavender grains in its bottom stir their fragrance into the air. This time it rises in a brief, fuller wave and lingers, sweet, dry, sun-warmed, with that last concentrated note released from what the basket kept after the carrying was done. You remain beneath the open doors, still looking in that direction where tools have been returned to rest. The sickle stays along the boards. The basket keeps its few fallen grains and the scent they yield to the warming light. Overhead, the tied sheaves hang clear in airy shade, and around you, the morning continues in the same measured order. Wind through the loft, light advancing, fragrance deepening, the labour already accomplished, leaving you free to lie where you are and remain still.
Chapter 7. Listening to the grower test a lavender floret for dryness. Below. You remain beneath the open doors, where the light has come farther in than it had before, though it is still pale enough to keep a little of dawn in it. The boards beside the hay mattress are warmer now under the stripe of sun, while the air moving through the loft keeps its cleaner edge in the shade. Above you, the sheaves hang in their long rows from the chestnut beams, stems upward, flower heads down, each bundle tied at the base with jute, each one spaced so air can pass around it. The scent has changed again since the first hour. It is less green than before, less like cut stems and cool field shadow, and more rounded now, fuller in the back of the nose, the sweetness beginning to open from the oil in the flowers as the loft takes on the day. From below comes the farm in parts so small that you do not have to follow them. A step on stone, a hinge, the far cluck of hens from somewhere beyond the yard wall. Then a pause long enough for the breeze to move over your forearm, and for a stem overhead to give the faintest dry rustle against another. You lie as you are, under the linen coverlet, one shoulder warmed, one calf still touched by the current from the doors, and your attention drifts downward because the sounds below have gone still. It is not a large sound. You hear no voice, no calling across the yard, no sharp tool lifted or set down. Only a small interruption in the morning's even texture, as if someone has stopped beside a hanging bunch or a basket of cut stems and turned all focus to one thing held close in the hand. You know the kind of pause without needing to see it. On a harvest morning like this, after the first cutting and the tying and the carrying up in the jute, there comes a point when the grower will take a floret between finger and thumb and test what the air has done so far. You can imagine the hand more easily than the face, thumb roughened a little from stalks and twine, finger pads dry from dust and sun, and the sap that leaves its faint tack on the skin before it dries away. The motion itself is small enough to disappear almost as soon as it begins. A single flower head brought near, rubbed once, perhaps twice, not crushed hard, only pressed enough to see how the calyx gives. The judgment comes through touch before anything else. If it is still too green, the floret keeps too much of its pliancy,
If it has come along properly in the airy shade, there is a slight papery crumble in the calyx, not brittle, not spent, only readying itself. And with that crumble, the oil releases at once. A richer thread of lavender rises from below. It reaches you a moment after the touch that released it, folded into the same moving air that comes through the open loft doors. It is not stronger in the blunt way of perfume, it is fresher than that, more exact. For an instant, the sweetness deepens and brightens at the same time. You breathe it in without trying. The scent overhead seems to answer, the hanging sheaves giving back their own warmed breath, until the whole loft is filled with that clear, blue-violet note made fuller by wood, straw, and sun. You do not need to sit up to know what has happened below. You know what happened from the scent that rises. A hand rubs a floret. Oil lifts. The air carries the result. In the loft, where the bundles are drying in order, you receive the same information by breathing. Nothing is hurried in the test. Lavender meant for drying cannot be rushed by heat, and no one here would leave it in direct sun to bleach and lose itself. The order has already been followed from the field to this loft, as it is each harvest week. Cut in the cool morning, while the stems are still firm and the oil held well in the flowers, gathered into even sheaves, tied at the base, then brought into airy shade and hung with space between them. Even from here, the work feels exact. The sheaves above your face are proof enough of that. Each one hanging at the same depth, each one turned so the bloom can dry cleanly.
Another pause below, and then perhaps the softest brush of plant matter against cloth, as though the tested stem has been laid back with the others. You picture it without effort. A basket on the stone or a bunch held at the hip, the grower looking not so much with the eyes as with fingers trained by many mornings. It is a kind of knowledge that stays close to the hands. The thumb learns what the eye alone would miss. A calyx that still bends too easily. A floret that leaves too much moisture on the skin. The right moment marked by that slight crumble and the quick release of scent. Overhead, one of the bundles turns a fraction in the breeze and settles again. The jute at its base stays taut. A few tiny grains, loosened from the flowers, let go and fall somewhere out of sight with no sound at all. The chestnut beams keep their dark, dry smell under the lavender, and beneath that comes the older scent of the loft itself. Sun-baked boards, a little dust in the seams, straw tucked below the planks, and the faint grain smell that rises when warmth reaches wood that has carried many seasons. Your hand, if you let your attention rest there, feels the changed air above the coverlet. Not warmer by much, only enough that the skin notices. The linen over your middle and thighs has taken on a little more heat where the light touches it. The fold lying across your shin remains cooler near the edge where the breeze gets under it. Such differences are enough to occupy you. Sun on one shoulder, moving air at the ankle, lavender deepening with every minute the loft keeps the day. Below, the unseen grower goes on being present in the smallest ways. A footstep shifts. Wood taps once against wood, perhaps a crate edge or the side of a drying frame. Then stillness again, but not emptiness. You can tell that someone remains there among the lower rooms or just beyond the threshold, checking, sorting, touching, letting the crop tell its own condition. No voice rises. No one comes to the ladder. You stay where you are, outside all need to join the work, and the distance between your rest and that practiced attention feels right. You find yourself thinking how much of farm knowledge is carried by pressure so slight it hardly seems like action at all. The right amount of force between finger and thumb, the turn of a stem to catch the air, the space left between hanging sheaves so the flowers do not heat against one another. Even the opening of the loft doors at first pale light belongs to the same kind of understanding. Let the Mistral-Touched air move through before the day grows warm. Let the bundles breathe. Let the oils keep their character. The barn does not need explanation for any of this.
It has been arranged around these habits for years. You are inside that arrangement now, lying under the open east doors while the crop dries in the shade above. A second wave of fragrance comes, fainter than the first, perhaps from another floret tested below, perhaps only from the first release spreading through the lower air and then rising. This time you catch more of its texture. There is the familiar floral sweetness, yes, but under it the resinous green of stem and leaf remains, and under that again a dry note, like husk or paper, the sign of the calyx beginning to crisp. It is this mixture that makes the loft smell alive rather than decorative. The lavender is still in process. It is becoming what it will be, and the air lets you notice each stage. You breathe in, and the scent seems to settle not just in the nose, but along the roof of the mouth. Cool at first, then almost honeyed as the exhale leaves. The body responds in tiny ways. Your jaw loosens. The back of your neck eases deeper into the hay mattress. Beneath the linen, your ribs rise and lower against the weight of the morning as steadily as the breeze moves through the doors. Nothing more is needed than that exchange. Air in, air out. Sweetness lifting, warmth spreading a little farther. From where you lie, you can almost map the loft by scent alone. Near the doors, the lavender is brighter, thinned by fresh air. Closer to the ladder opening, where the cooler pocket remains, there is a touch more metal from the zinc pitcher and a trace of well water if the air turns that way. Above your head, where the bundles hang thickest, the fragrance gathers and then loosens again whenever the breeze passes through. It is enough to know these regions without moving among them.
Another board below gives a muted complaint under someone's weight, then falls still. You imagine the grower rubbing thumb and finger together after the test, feeling what remains there. A little oil, a little dust, perhaps one tiny papery fragment from the calyx. That residue would tell its own truth. The work is judged by hand and scent. The crop is readying itself. Not all at once, not every sheaf in 1 hour, but steadily, in the same way the light has moved from the threshold toward your mattress, in the same way the sweetness in the loft has grown from green to full. The thought passes through you and leaves no need to hold it. Above, the hanging rows continue their slight, almost sound whenever the air shifts. Beside the wall, the sickle remains where it was set down, blade turned inward. The wicker basket keeps its few fallen grains. The lower windows with their chalky blue shutters stay out of sight from here, but you remember their faded colour in the stone below, and somehow that weathered cornflower tone belongs with this scent, this morning, this measured work. Everything here has been used long enough to lose its newness. Wood, paint, wicker, metal, twine, even the gestures of the hands below have been worn into ease. A final, richer breath of lavender reaches you, then thins naturally into the loft's broader fragrance. The test is over for the moment. Whatever was needed has been learned. Below, the grower moves on without announcement, and the air closes the small gap left by that attention, carrying the result upward until it becomes part of the morning around you. You remain under the open doors, breathing what the hand below has released. The sun has gone a little farther across the boards. The linen lies warmer over your legs. Overhead, the bundles hang in their ordered rows, drying exactly as they should, and from below the farm returns to its low, familiar sounds, while the scent, lifted by finger and thumb, stays with you a little longer before blending back into wood, straw, and light. Chapter 8. The Chapel Bell. Across the fields and the swallows in the morning wind, you remain under the open doors, breathing what the hand below has released. The sun has gone a little farther across the boards. The linen lies warmer over your legs. Overhead, the bundles hang in their ordered rows,
drying exactly as they should, and from below the farm returns to its low, familiar sounds. After a while your attention loosens from the boards, from the nearest beam, from the basket and sickle set aside where the wall still keeps a little of the night's coolness. It moves outward through the opening instead, through the broad eastward doors folded back at first pale light, following the same clear air that passes over the loft and out across the fields. The barn remains around you in all its plain certainty, old planks under the mattress, straw tucked in their seams, lavender drying above. But the morning beyond it feels wider now. The air has that early Provençal cleanness that comes before heat gathers in the stone. It enters in long, even ribbons, Mistral-Touched, carrying no dust yet, only distance. You feel it across your forearms where the coverlet has slipped back, and along one bare calf where the linen no longer reaches. Near the ladder opening, the cooler pocket remains, rising from the shaded lower room where the zinc pitcher hangs on its peg. But here by the doors, the air is already changing, less chill than before, touched now by the first steadier warmth of the sun. Beyond the threshold, the land opens in layers you do not need to see all at once to know. The nearest yard is still partly hidden by the angle of the loft and the roofline below, with the chalky blue shutters on the lower windows catching a little more light than they did earlier, their cornflower paint gone pale from years of sun. Past the barn wall the fields begin. Beyond them, farther than sight needs to measure, lies the village chapel whose bell sometimes reaches the farm thinly across the open country. You do not listen for it in any deliberate way. You simply lie where you are and hear the morning in layers. A hen somewhere beyond the yard wall, reduced by distance to a dry little call. The faint knock of wood from below, perhaps a gate eased shut, or a handle set against stone. Then only the air again, passing through the rows of hanging stems and turning their flower heads by the smallest degree before they settle back into stillness. The lavender above you answers every change in temperature. Earlier it held more of the cut stem in it, a green-silver note, almost cool in the nose. Now sweetness has begun to gather in it more fully. Not heavy, not thick, only deeper, as if warmth has found the oil hidden in the florets and coaxed it outward. When the breeze comes through the doors and threads between the bundles tied with jute to the dark chestnut beams, that sweetness moves from one part of the loft to another in light drifts. You breathe it without effort. It mixes with old wood, with hay, with the faint grain smell kept in the floorboards. Then, from far across the fields, the chapel bell reaches you. Only once. The sound is small by the time it arrives, not because the bell itself is small, but because there is so much open land between the chapel and this loft. It comes thinned by distance and wind, rounded at the edges, so that what reaches you is less a strike than a clear, suspended tone. It enters the barn through the same open doors as the air, and seems to rest for a moment among the beams and hanging bundles before it fades. After it passes, the quiet feels larger. Not emptier, larger. The bell briefly measures the distance between here and the village, between this loft and the fields and the road and the low cluster of stone houses beyond. You stay where you are and listen. A swallow crosses the opening so quickly that at first it is only a flick of movement against brightness. Then another follows, lower this time, turning on a narrow wing with a precision that seems effortless. They are out over the yard and then beyond it, catching insects in the morning air. Their flight briefly marks the open sky. A small, dry churr reaches the loft a heartbeat after one of them passes, and then even that is gone.
You have the sense, lying here, that the barn is both shelter and lookout. Behind you and above you are timber, bundles, rope, wicker, the familiar inward things of storage and drying and harvest. In front of you is open country. The beams darken the upper part of your vision, the doorway brightens the lower, and between them your gaze can drift as loosely as your breath. The linen coverlet has gathered a little more heat where the sun reaches it.
One corner lies across your thigh with a pleasant weight, its weave softened by many washings and many summers. Beneath your shoulder blades, the hay mattress still gives that faint, uneven support that keeps you aware, in the best way, of where you are resting. Here, a thicker place in the stuffing presses upward. There, a flatter place lets you sink a touch more deeply. Through it all, the boards remain firm. You can feel their steadiness underneath the mattress, old planks laid to last, keeping their dry smell even as the day moves on. Outside, the swallows pass again, farther off now. You do not try to follow them with your eyes. It is enough to know they are there, cutting arcs through the brightening air over the farm and the fields beyond. Their movement belongs to the same hour as the opened loft doors, the same hour as the floret rubbed below, the same hour as the first tools set aside after cutting. Harvest week has its own order. Doors opened while the sky is still pale. Lavender brought in from the rows before the heat rises. Sheaves tied at the base, hung up in airy shade so the flowers dry without bleaching. A grower below checking with finger and thumb when the calyx begins to crumble just so. And above all of it, this widening morning, crossing the boards by inches. Another current of air enters, a little steadier than the last. It passes over your face and throat, cool first, then less so by the time it reaches your shoulder in the sun. The nearest bundles stir almost too lightly to see, only a small turning at their tips. A few dry grains of lavender release and fall somewhere into the wicker basket by the wall, with a sound too slight to separate from the rest of the loft. Their scent rises anyway, joining what is already in the air. Far below, a cartwheel gives a brief wooden complaint and then rolls once over the yard stones. Not near enough to jar the stillness, only enough to remind you that the farm has gone on arranging itself beneath you. Somewhere a bucket is lifted, or a pail shifted by its handle. Hens call again from beyond the wall. Each sound arrives muted by timber, by height, by distance, and by the open morning itself. Nothing catches sharply here. Even the smallest noise seems to travel through air wide enough to smooth its edges. You think, without needing to shape it fully, that this is how the loft keeps you resting while the day opens farther and farther around it. Not by shutting the world out, but by letting it arrive already softened. Bell, swallows, wheel, birds, the touch of wind through lavender stems. The bell does not sound again. Its single note has already done its work, if work is even the word for it. It has placed the village somewhere beyond the visible fields, and then left the air to itself. In the long stretch after it, you become aware again of the slow continuity of smaller things. The warm stripe on the boards extending a little farther under one hanging row. The cooler shade near the ladder where the pitcher remains against the wall, metal still carrying some trace of dawn. The smell of chestnut beams dry overhead. The faint sweetness of the linen where sun has touched it. A swallow sweeps nearer this time, close enough that you can see the dark curve of its back before it turns and vanishes past the doorway. Its motion is so quick that it leaves no image behind, only a brief, sharpened sense of open space. For a moment your attention follows it out over the barn roof and into the brightening sky, and then, naturally, it returns. Back to the loft, back to the boards, the coverlet, the rows of lavender hanging in proper order above your chest and knees and feet. You notice how the air changes as it crosses the threshold. Outside, over the fields, it is broad and moving. Inside, among beams and bundles, it becomes patterned. It slips around the hanging sheaves, around the ladder opening, around the wicker hotter, and the long handle of the sickle resting beside it. It cools the skin just above the coverlet and leaves the parts under linen warm. It brings in the faint mineral dryness of distance and then takes on lavender as it moves through the loft, By the time it reaches the back wall, it smells more of flowers than of fields. The light has gone from pale to a clearer gold, though still mild enough that the boards do not glare. You can see it touching the lower edges of the hanging bundles now, catching here and there on the bloom of the florets, so that some rows seem almost dusted with brightness, while others remain in shade. The contrast is slight, enough only to make the loft feel more dimensional, more fully entered by morning. From outside comes one more swallow call, thin as a thread, and even that passes. You lie still and let your hearing widen one last time. Beyond the barn are the fields, beyond the fields the chapel, above them the swallows. Through all of it, the same air moving east to west, clean and dry, carrying the bell when it sounds, carrying the scent of cut lavender upward through the loft, carrying the first warmth of day over stone and timber and linen. You can follow it outward as far as you like, and when you stop, you are still here. The hay beneath you settles by almost nothing, a minute giving of straw and ticking fabric. The coverlet rests more warmly over your legs than it did before. Overhead, the bundles remain suspended from the chestnut beams, each sheaf tied and spaced for drying, each one adding its share to the deepening fragrance. The farm below continues in low fragments too distant to sort for long, and where the bell had been, there is only the open morning again, stretched wide across the fields and entering the loft in steady breaths of air. Chapter 9. Sunlight reaching farther across the loft and warming the lavender. The light has changed while you have been lying here. It is no longer the first pale strip that only touched the edge of the coverlet and then withdrew into brightness beyond the doors. It has come farther in now, broadening as it crosses the loft, no longer silver, but a thin, clear gold, laid in long bands over the old boards. You can trace its slow reach without moving more than your eyes. It lies across a basket rim, across the floor where loose straw catches in the cracks, across the lower beam where the wood shows its rubbed grain, and then farther still until it meets the hanging lavender and warms the lowest flowers first. The linen over your legs has changed with it. Earlier it held the cool of the room, and the breeze from the open doors could pass through the weave and leave a fresh line along your shins. Now the cloth has gathered a little heat from the sun where it falls, and the difference is plain even through stillness. One part of you under a dry, mild warmth, another still touched by the loft's older coolness. Your shoulder, where the light found you some time ago, has settled into that warmth so completely that you almost stop noticing it. The body accepts such things quickly when they arrive by degrees. Above, the bundles hang in their ordered rows from the chestnut beams, each sheaf tied at the base with jute, stems upward, flower heads down. In this light, their colour shifts again. What had seemed dim violet in dawn now shows itself more clearly. Grey-green stalks, blue softened toward ash at the tips. A dusting of bloom that catches brightness and then gives it back in a duller tone. The lower edges of the sheaves are lit first, while the upper stems remain in shade. For a while, the loft holds both shade and sun. You breathe, and the lavender smells different now. At first light, it carried more stem than flower, more cut greenness and the silvery scent of plants that have only just been gathered from the rows. Then, with the first warming, it opened a little further, enough that sweetness rose through the sharper notes. Now the air has gone another step. The oil in the flowers is easier to smell. Not heavy, not thick, only fuller, as if the fragrance has rounded at the edges. Each breath brings wood, straw, old grain from the planks, and over all of it that dry blue sweetness becoming more distinct as the loft warms little by little. You do not need to think about how the bundles came here, but the order of them makes it easy to remember. Cut in the cool morning before the heat begins to draw too hard on the oil. Gathered into even sheaves, tied low at the base. Carried up in the wicker hotter, hung where air can move through them and direct sun cannot bleach them too quickly. The rows above you show that care in the spacing between bundles, in the way none are crowded, in the way the open doors send a clean current through the loft from east to west. The breeze continues through the doorway, touching the warmed boards and the shaded ones alike. It passes over your bare forearm, then the side of your calf where the coverlet has slipped back a little. And the contrast is finer now than before. Earlier, the air felt distinctly cool. Now it carries the freshness of morning without the night's chill behind it. A moving thread of clean air, Mistral-Touched, carrying field dryness and the scent of the loft together. You can feel where it crosses your skin and where it does not, each change exact and unforced. Somewhere below, a sound rises and fades. A wooden shift, perhaps a gate or a cartboard settling after being lifted. It does not ask to be followed. The farm has already found its pace for the day, and from up here the sounds come thinned by distance and timber. A hen calls once from farther off, then only the loft again, the mild rub of stems against one another overhead, almost too slight to call a sound, and from deep in the wood around you, an occasional creak as sun reaches another part of the barn. One board near the foot of the mattress gives such a creak now. Not sharp, only a dry easing as the warmth enters it. You feel the floor through the hay and linen before you hear it, a minute change in the settled structure beneath you. The old planks creak as they warm. Their grain smell rises more readily too, warmed out of the boards and the straw tucked beneath them. Sun-baked wood, a little dust, the faint memory of grain stored long ago. It mixes so naturally with the lavender that after a while you stop sorting one from the other. The stripe of sunlight nearest the wall has brightened. It inches over the floorboards with a steadiness that is almost impossible to see in the moment, yet plain when you compare where it was and where it is. It has reached farther than the sickle's handle now. The long-handled tool still rests where it was set aside after the morning cutting, its curved bill-hook blade turned inward. Beside it, the wicker hot leans against the wall, its woven sides catching light on the upper ribs, while the inside remains shaded. And then, after so much gradual approach, the bright line arrives at the basket. It touches the wicker first at one corner, picking out the pale wear on the cane where many hands have gripped it over many harvests. The sun does not flood it all at once. It lays itself along one edge, then over a wider patch, warming the basket rib by rib. In the bottom lie a few loosened lavender grains that fell there when the sheaves were carried up and hung. As the light reaches them, the grains release their scent as they warm. You notice how the loft has become a map of temperatures. Near the open doors, warmth gathers quickly where the light strikes the boards. By the ladder opening, where the zinc pitcher hangs on its peg, there is still a cooler pocket, shaded and mineral, carrying a faint trace of metal and well water whenever the air turns that way. Between those places, the room changes by degrees you feel more than see. The top of one foot warmer than the ankle, the back of one hand cool where the breeze crosses it, the side of your neck warmed by reflected light from the boards. The body settles into this without needing to adjust much. Your back sinks a little deeper into the hay mattress, which is warmed on the upper layer while keeping its denser coolness below. The straw inside it gives under you with a dry, patient spring. Through the linen you can feel where it is flattened from use and where it still lifts slightly in uneven places. The coverlet lies more lightly now, no longer something to keep out dawn's chill, but simply a layer of cloth, sun-softened, faintly rough at the fold where it rests across your thigh. Overhead, One of the lower sheaves turns a fraction in the moving air, not enough to sway, only enough that the flower heads shift their angle to the light. For a moment, the brighter side shows, dusty blue with a silver cast, and then it settles back. The jute tie at its base remains taut. The chestnut beam above it stays dark, except where a blade of sun has reached its underside, revealing old tool marks and the polish left by years of handling and use. You breathe in again, and the sweetness has deepened another shade. This is the hour when drying lavender begins to smell less like the field and more like itself. Not yet the papery dryness that comes later, not yet the fuller release judged by finger and thumb when a grower rubs a floret and feels the calyx give slightly. That test belongs below, where hands can sort what is ready from what must hang longer. Up here, you know the progress only by air. The flowers warm, the scent rounds and opens, the loft grows more golden. It is enough. Through the doorway, the fields beyond are too bright now to look at for long. The eye returns indoors, to the shade and light crossing one another on the floor. The lower barn windows with their chalky blue shutters must be taking more sun by now as well, though from where you lie, you see only a slice of brightness and stone. It is enough to know the farmyard has moved farther into morning too. Stone warming, pails set where they belong, the first work already done before the heat. Another current of air passes through the loft, and this one carries both warmth and freshness together. It moves through the hanging rows, over the basket, along the boards, beneath the coverlet's edge. The linen stirs once against your shin and then rests again. The warmed lavender gives a little more of itself to the room. You can feel how the place is filling, not with noise, not with activity, but with day. Light occupies more of the floor. Heat settles into wood. Fragrance rises from flowers that only an hour ago still held more of the cool field in them. Nothing arrives all at once. That is part of the comfort of it. The sun does not leap from beam to beam. The scent does not suddenly bloom and overtake the room. Even the farm below continues by fragments too mild to gather into a story. A step, a wheel, a bird beyond the wall, then distance again. You remain where you are, and the morning comes farther in around you by measures so small they can only be felt after they have passed. The bright line across the floor has moved enough now to touch the boards beside the mattress. Their colour changes under it from weathered brown to a warmer honey tone, and the grain shows more clearly, each long line and knot made visible by the angle of the sun. A narrow straw stem lying there casts a thread-like shadow. Dust motes pass through the light and vanish when they leave it, too slight to hold your attention for long. Your arm, where it lies uncovered, has taken on the same warmth as the boards near it. Not hot, only sun-touched. Your calves rest under the coverlet in a milder heat than before. The breeze comes and goes over these warmer places and makes them easier to notice. Skin, linen, hay, wood, lavender, air. The distinctions remain, but they sit closer together now, less separate than they were at dawn. Above you, the rows of drying bundles continue in perfect stillness, except for the smallest turning at the tips. Their scent has become the chapter of the morning you are in. It rises from the flower heads, from the grains in the basket, from the floret tested below some time ago, from all the cut stems gathered and tied in the cool hours, and brought here to keep their oil-rich flowers from harsh, direct heat. You lie beneath the result of many practiced mornings, and the order of it feels natural. The loft is brighter now than it was, warmer too, and still the change continues so slowly that you can rest inside it without ever needing to mark a moment when 1 hour became another. Sun across boards, sun on wicker, sun touching the lower edges of the sheaves, lavender turning sweeter in the warming air, the day entering by degrees through the open doors and remaining there.
Chapter 10. Remaining still while the barn settles into the harvest morning. The loft is brighter now than it was, warmer too, and still the change continues so slowly that you can rest inside it without ever needing to mark a moment when 1 hour became another. Sun across boards, sun on wicker, sun touching the lower edges of the sheaves, lavender turning sweeter in the warming air. The day entering by degrees through the open doors and remaining there. You lie where you have been, under the slant of light and under the rows of hanging bundles, and by now you no longer need to place each thing around you in order to feel where you are. The old planks under the hay mattress have their own slight give. The linen over your legs has warmed on top and stays cooler underneath. The air from the east doors passes over your forearm, then across your ankle, then on through the loft, carrying the dry blue scent from the flowers and the faint grain smell that rises from the boards when sun reaches them. The same air returns. The scent deepens slightly. Above you, the dark chestnut beams answer the warmth in their own way. At first, it is only the faintest easing in the timber, a sound so ordinary it barely becomes a sound at all, more a small adjustment somewhere overhead, one beam taking the morning into itself. Then another, farther off toward the loft doors. Not sharp, not sudden. The barn has stood through many harvests. You hear that old process continue in scattered notes, each one brief, each one complete. The bundles hung from those beams move less than they did earlier, but now and then the breeze finds a row of stems and turns a few flower heads against one another. A faint brushing follows, then stillness again. You know, without needing to look up every time, how they are arranged above you. Stems up, flower heads down, tied at the base with jute in even sheaves, space left between them so air can pass through. Morning cut, gathered evenly, bound, carried up in the hot, hung in airy shade where the flowers can dry without bleaching too fast in the heat. The work has already been done properly. What remains is time, air, and this gradual warming. From below comes the farm in its settled pace. A cartwheel turns somewhere beyond the wall, wood and iron muted by distance. It rolls for a moment over packed ground or stone, then stops. Farther off than that, there is the sound of a small tractor at work in some other field. It comes and thins and is gone behind the open brightness outside. You hear them and remain still. The linen shifts at your shin. Not enough to uncover you, only a slight lift and resettling as the breeze enters through the broad doors and crosses the loft. The coverlet has that familiar sun-softened weight, light enough to move at the edges, heavy enough to fall back into place at once. Beneath you, the hay mattress keeps its patient shape, firmer at the center, a little more compressed where shoulders and hips have rested longest. Straw tucked below the old flooring gives off that dry, toasted smell that comes more fully once the loft has warmed. Again the timber gives a small creak. Again the hanging stems answer with the barest rustle. Wind through the doors, sun on the boards, lavender opening in the heat by increments too fine to count. A sound below, then no sound, then another. Near the ladder opening, where the shade remains longer, the air is cooler. The zinc pitcher by the ladder would still be cool to the touch there, metal carrying the memory of the night and the well. You do not need to reach for it. It is enough to know the darker corner remains as it was, the pitcher on its peg, the ladder descending to the lower room, the barn keeping both shade and sun at once. Below, something heavier shifts. It is not abrupt. A hoof, or the broad, dull set of one,
presses and adjusts beneath the loft, followed by the faint scrape of weight changing over packed earth or worn boards in a stall. A horse, perhaps, or a mule, making room under itself the way stable animals do when they have been standing in one place long enough. The sound rises through the floor in a single, measured movement. Then stillness returns at once. No harness clink follows, no stamping, just that one change of balance, then rest. The boards under you remain steady. The sheaves overhead remain in their rows. Far off, a hen calls once and falls silent. Somewhere outside, a piece of cloth taps lightly against wood. The sound comes and goes so briefly you almost fold it into the breeze itself. The animal below remains still. You have been here long enough now that even the distinctions between one layer and another begin to soften. The lavender above is not separate from the air moving through it. The air is not separate from the warmth lying across your shoulder and the top of your foot beneath the linen. The boards are not separate from the scent rising from them. Each thing remains itself, and yet all of it has settled into one arrangement your body no longer needs to measure. You know where the doors are, where the ladder is, where the tools were set down without looking. Still, if your mind drifts that way, the details return in their places with no effort. The sickle with its curved billhook blade turned inward beside the wicker jute. A few loosened grains of lavender in the basket's weave. The chalky cornflower shutters below, brighter now in the sun than they were at first light. The chestnut beams dark above the paler floorboards. The rows of bundles tied in natural jute. Nothing arranged for display, only for use. Another cart sound reaches you, more distant this time. Then the faintest jolt and stop. You can imagine the pace of it without seeing it. No hurry, only the next task following the last. Somewhere below, perhaps, a hand rubs another floret between finger and thumb, searching for that slight papery crumble in the calyx and the release of oil that tells how the drying goes. You do not hear the rub itself now, only remember the richer thread of scent it sent upward earlier. And because you remember it, the fragrance above seems fuller for a moment. The breeze enters again through the open doors. It has changed since dawn. It is still clean, still touched by the mistral that travels the plateau in the early hours, but it no longer has the first edge of chill. On your bare forearm it feels smooth rather than cold. Along your calf, where the coverlet has slipped back a little, it meets skin already warmed by the sun and leaves behind a cooler line that fades almost at once. The corner of the linen flutters once against your ankle and falls still. A board gives somewhere near the wall as the wood continues to ease. A hanging bundle turns a fraction and settles. The animal below, having shifted once, stays where it is. The distant machine sound in the fields rises and thins, never drawing near. You rest more deeply, because the morning no longer feels like something arriving from outside. It has spread through the barn enough now that inside and outside meet at the doors and continue through one another. The scent of the loft goes out over the yard. The air from the fields comes in over the mattress and under the beams. Sun reaches farther over the planks and leaves a warm strip beside the cooler boards nearer the ladder. The barn is part of the harvest morning below it, and your stillness has become another part of that same arrangement. Breeze, board, faint rustle of stems, the far machine thinning away, a pause broad enough to rest in. Then again, breeze through the doors, warmer now, timber easing by a hair. The animal below remains still. Sun has reached farther along the floor than before, though you do not need to turn your head to know it. The warmth near your shoulder has spread toward the middle of your back, through the linen and the mattress. One foot lies in a brighter patch than the other. The boards nearest the open doors hold a mild, baked smell now. Chestnut and pine and dust warmed together. Over all of it, the lavender keeps opening. Not fresher, not greener, but fuller and drier, the sweetness more settled in the air. And beneath that sweetness, beneath the wood and straw and the passing farm sounds, there is the steady fact of the loft itself, continuing exactly as it is. Doors wide to the east, beams overhead, bundles in rows, tools put away, pitcher by the ladder, shutters below in the sun, one animal at rest under the floor, and you lying among these familiar things until they no longer feel like surroundings at all, only part of the morning.
Chapter 11. Drifting with the Mistral-Touched air through the open loft doors. And after a while, even the familiar details lose their edges a little. The doors are still open to the east, wide on their hinges as they have been since the sky first paled. Before the warmth gathers fully, the loft is opened so the Mistral-Touched air can move through the hanging sheaves. It comes in cleanly, not cold now, only fresh where it crosses the threshold, and then it travels the length of the loft in a long, even passage, slipping between stems, under beams, over the linen drawn across you. You feel it first where the coverlet has fallen away from your forearm, then along one ankle, then at the side of your neck where a little warmth has already settled from the sun. It is not the dawn coolness of earlier hours. That has thinned. This air has changed with the morning, and your skin has changed with it. What touches you now passes over warmth already there, so that the breeze and the sun do not oppose each other. They meet on you, one moving, one still. Above, the lavender stirs so slightly that the motion is more sensed than seen. The bundles hang from the dark chestnut beams in ordered rows, and you have looked at them for so long that you no longer need to follow each line. Your eyes can rest half open or close altogether, and still you know the dusky weight of the flowers overhead and the beams crossing the loft in shadow and sun. The scent has deepened again. Earlier it still carried something cut and green in it, a silvery sharpness from stem and leaf. Now the warmth has drawn more sweetness from the flower heads, and the moving air lifts it, loosens it, carries it from one row to the next until the loft smells of lavender, old wood and straw. Every breath finds the same mixture, though never in exactly the same balance. One moment more lavender, another more sun-warmed plank, another the faint grain smell that rises from the floor beneath the mattress. You lie where you have been all morning, and by now the body has learned the loft's arrangement better than thought has. The hay mattress gives in the places where your weight has settled it. The linen coverlet, faded pale from years of washing and sun, lies across your legs and hips with almost no weight at all, except where a fold has gathered near one knee. Beneath your shoulder blades the mattress feels warmer than before. Beneath your calves there is still a trace of the loft's earlier coolness, stored in the hay and boards and slow to leave. It enters through the open doors and moves through the lavender first, taking on that sweetness, then crosses the space above you and lowers toward the planks, where the sun has already reached in long bands. It slips toward the ladder opening and the shaded air there, then rises again, as if the loft itself has its own slow circulation. Not a current you need to follow, only one you can notice when it touches skin or shifts the scent a little. From below, the day continues in the same restrained way it has all along. A muted step on stone, the far scratch and cluck of hens. Once, a small wooden knock from the yard, so ordinary that it folds into the rest of the morning almost before you have heard it. No voice rises clearly enough to shape words. The work below has found its pace and kept it. You remain above it, not apart in any lonely sense, only resting in another layer of the same place. The breeze comes again, and this time the corner of the coverlet lifts. At first it is only a loosening, so slight you feel it before you see it, the cloth ceasing to press in one narrow line along your shin. Then the linen rises the breadth of a hand, no more,
but enough that air enters underneath and moves over the skin that had been quietly warming in its own held space. The underside of the cloth cools. Your leg cools after it, not all at once, only in a thin, passing sheet, a freshness sliding between fabric and skin where there had been stillness a moment before. The coverlet hovers there for the briefest pause. In that pause you feel how little it weighs and how much it has been holding. Not pressure, almost the opposite, a soft keeping in of warmth, a nearness the body had stopped noticing because it had become continuous. With the cloth lifted, you feel the bed's small climate give way to the loft's wider one. Then the linen settles. It does not fall back where it was. One edge drifts inward and lays itself along your calf with a new intention. The fold drawing closer, the fabric smoothing here and gathering there, until it comes to rest in a line that is both gentler and more enclosing than before. The air leaves a space beneath it little by little. Warmth begins again under the cloth, but altered now. The coverlet settles closer along your calf. That small change stays in your awareness because touch narrows the mind so easily. The linen has its own texture, a dry softness with tiny slubs left in the weave, and where it is settled more closely over your leg, you can feel both the cloth and the shape beneath it at once. Warmth underneath, cooler air passing over the top, the faintest drag of fabric when you breathe more deeply. Nothing needs adjusting. The body receives a new fold and, in receiving it, gives a little more of its weight away. Near the doors, warmth on the boards. Higher up, a trace of stored coolness among the beams. By the ladder, shade that keeps the air different for longer. Across your chest and shoulders, the place where sun and moving air meet. It would be possible to map the whole room this way with closed eyes, by warmth and freshness alone, by what the skin notices without effort. You do not need to think of the harvest, and yet its order lies all around you so plainly that thought can drift across it and then drift on. The sheaves are hung in airy shade, the tools are set down. What remains is time and air, and the slow release of scent as warmth rises through the loft. Somewhere below, perhaps, there may still be a few loose florets from an earlier test, rubbed between finger and thumb to judge dryness. You do not hear that touch again, but its knowledge remains in the place. The farm knows by hand and knows what is ready, what must stay hung a little longer, what should not be hurried. A swallow passes outside the doors, too quick for more than a flicker of motion at the edge of sight. Then only brightness again beyond the opening, and the pale Provençal sky, already washed clear of dawn colour. If you were to look farther, beyond the barn and the yard, you could imagine the fields stretching toward the plateau under broadening light. But you do not have to follow the land outward now. The loft is enough. The breeze comes from that wider country and arrives already thinned and usable, carrying distance without asking your attention to travel with it. The boards under the mattress answer the warming day, with an occasional minute easing sound. Not a crack, only the old wood adjusting where sun reaches farther in. You have heard those sounds for so long this morning that they have become part of the loft's breathing rhythm, along with the brush of stems overhead and the cloth's faint movement when air passes through. Even the scent changes rhythmically now, a richer wave when the breeze moves through the denser rows of lavender, a drier note when it crosses the planks and straw, then sweetness again.
Your own breathing begins to borrow that pattern without meaning to. Inhale, and the lavender is fuller. Exhale, and the linen settles a little flatter over your middle. The body grows less distinct in this. Not gone, only less separate from what surrounds it. Your shoulders sink more completely into the mattress. The small of your back finds the shape it has already made there. Your thighs are warm under the cloth. One hand rests where it fell, palm turned enough to catch the moving air over the knuckles. The face feels aloft differently from the rest of you. A trace of warmth over the cheek nearest the light. A fresher line along the templar near, where the breeze passes on. Nothing interrupts for long. A hen sounds once in the distance and is gone again. From below comes the faintest shift, perhaps of a bucket moved from one stone to another, perhaps of a door eased back into place. The sound does not climb fully into the loft. It reaches you softened by wall and floor and air, then thins. The barn keeps most things in their proper measure. If you open your eyes, the light has broadened enough that the lower edges of the hanging bundles glow where the sun catches them. Not bright, not glaring, just enough to show the difference between the upper shade and the lower warmth, between stem and flower, beam and air. Dust is visible only when it crosses the lit space, then it disappears again. The old boards show their grain more clearly where the sun lies across them, worn smooth in places, rougher in others, with narrow seams where bits of straw remain tucked. If you close your eyes, none of that is lost. The last keeps its shape through touch and scent and the steady movement of air. The Mistral-Touched air comes and goes in long, even passages, though even comes and goes is more change than it feels like now. It is simply present, crossing the loft with enough steadiness that your skin can trust it. It moves over your bare forearm, under the edge of the linen near your ankle, across the warm hollow at the base of your throat. It passes the beams and the hanging rows and the ladder opening. It slips out again through the darker interior behind you, carrying with it a trace of lavender and hay. And then another passage follows much the same path. By now you hardly mark the difference between one and the next. The farm below continues, but from this height and this stillness, its sounds no longer separate themselves very clearly. They are part of the morning's underlayer, like the lower note beneath a melody too slow to name. Above that, the nearer sounds remain. The faint brush of stems, the cloth's occasional shift, the old loft settling by degrees into warmth. Above even those is the open brightness at the doors, where the air enters and the day keeps widening beyond sight. You stay where you are, warmed through the linen, cooled in passing along the edges, breathing what the loft gives with each slow breath. The coverlet lies over your leg in its new fold, closer now, as if the air itself had laid a hand there and then withdrawn. The lavender hangs in its ordered rows, and the air keeps moving through them, through the open doors, through the sun, through the old barn, over you, again and again. Chapter 12. Resting in the warm lavender loft as morning continues without you, and the air keeps moving through them, through the open doors, through the sun, through the old barn, over you, again and again. You stay where you are beneath it, under the faded linen and under the rows of drying lavender, with the warmth more settled now than it was before, no longer arriving in first touches but spread across the boards, the mattress, your legs, your shoulder, the bridge of your collarbone where the coverlet has slipped a little lower. The hay beneath you has its familiar give. A stem presses lightly near one hip. The planks below keep their dry smell of grain and old heat, as if many summers have passed into them,
and remained there in a thin, sun-baked layer. Above, the bundles hang in their even order from the dark chestnut beams, stems upward, flower heads downward, tied at the base with jute. Cut in the cool morning, gathered into sheaves, carried in the hot from the rows, brought up here into airy shade, left with space between one bundle and the next. Now, with the loft warmer, the scent has deepened again. It is no longer the green edge of cut stems. It has turned fuller, sweeter, almost powdery at the edges, though still clean, still bright enough that each breath feels clear as it enters you. The open doors face east, broad and steady on their hinges, and beyond them the light has lost its first pallor. It lies over the fields in a wider gold. You do not need to look directly to know the shape of the morning now. The brightness on the threshold tells you. The warmth on the tops of your feet tells you. The way the lower edges of the hanging sheaves have become more fragrant tells you. The loft has changed little by little into this longer, easier brightness, spread through the barn near the Plateau de Valensole. Somewhere below, a hen calls once, dry and brief, then stops. The sound reaches you thinned by boards, stone and distance. After that, there is only the continued life of the farm in pieces too small to follow separately. A shift of wood, a faint knock from below, perhaps a hand setting something down, perhaps a gate moving and settling back. None of it rises enough to gather your attention for long. It passes through the same way the air passes through, becoming part of the loft's steady morning. Near the ladder opening, the cooler pocket remains, though less than before. If you let your awareness drift that way, you can almost feel the difference across the room without moving at all. Sun near the doors and along the boards, shade by the ladder, the old zinc pitcher still hanging on its peg where it always hangs. You remember the smell of metal and well water from it, the cold touch it would still keep at the handle if you reached for it. But you do not reach. It is enough that it is there, a plain, useful thing in its place, while you remain in yours. The blue shutters below the loft windows are out of sight from where you rest unless you angle your gaze downward, but you have seen them often enough this morning that they stay with you anyway. That chalky cornflower paint, faded by years of Provençal sun, softened at the edges, bright and worn at once. They belong to the lower part of the barn as naturally as the beams belong to the loft and the lavender belongs overhead. You do not need to keep looking at them. They remain part of the shape of the place, as known as the ladder, the baskets, the wall, the floor. A current of air comes through the doors again, a little cooler than the warmth resting on your skin. It travels first through the hanging rows, and the flower heads answer with the faintest, dry brushing against one another. Then it reaches the linen over your legs. The corner of the coverlet lifts a finger's width and falls back across your shin. The breeze touches your bare forearm, your calves, the side of your neck, and for a moment you can feel both temperatures at once. Sun kept in the cloth and boards, morning still moving in from outside. Then the air passes on, and the loft returns to its slower balance. The sickle and the wicker hot remain where they were set aside after the first cut, farther back from the doors where the shade lasted longer. By now, a line of light has reached the basket's rim and left a pale gold strip along one woven edge. A few loosened grains of lavender caught in the bottom have warmed enough to give off a stronger scent than before. The blade of the sickle, turned inward, gives back no sharp brightness from here, only a dull curve in the corner of your sight. Their work for the early hours is done. Very far off across the fields, something carries through the distance and thins before it reaches you. No more than a softened note in the morning air, then less than that. It does not gather into an event. It briefly makes the loft feel wider, as if the space between barn and village has briefly entered and then stretched back out again. A swallow passes outside the doors, too quick to follow, marked only by a flicker near the brightness, and the thought of wings cutting the air. You settle more deeply into the mattress without meaning to. The linen has warmed over your thighs and lower belly, while the underside still keeps a trace of coolness where it folds. Your shoulders are loose against the coarse, forgiving pad beneath them. The small of your back has found the hollow that suits it. Even your hands, which may have been half curled before, have opened a little against the cloth. You notice these things in passing, the way you notice the sun on the boards, not to change them, only because they are there. Above your face, the lavender hangs close enough that if you were standing, you could brush the lower flowers with the back of your fingers. Resting as you are, you know them by scent and by shadow. The bunches nearest the doors are brighter now, their faded blue-violet clearer in the sun. Farther in, where the beams still cast bars of shade, the bundles keep their duskier tone. The chestnut overhead smells dry and faintly tannic when the air shifts. Once in a while, one sheaf turns a fraction on its jute tie and comes to rest again, too slight a movement to count as anything more than the barn continuing with the day. The earlier Floret test still seems present in the scent. Earlier, a floret was rubbed between finger and thumb to judge the drying by the release of oil and the slight papery crumble of the calyx. That knowledge seems to stay in the air long after the gesture is finished. It belongs to the same order as the opening of the doors, at first pale light during harvest week, to let this Mistral-Touched air move through the bundles. It belongs to the same order as the sheaves hung in shade, not under direct sun. It is simply how the place arranges itself around the crop, and around the mining, and around you lying here among both. Another sound rises from below, almost too mild to separate from the rest. Perhaps a pail touching stone, perhaps a stable door eased back into place. Then a brief shifting weight from an animal under the loft, one hoof adjusting against packed ground, and stillness again. The farm continues in these brief marks, never enough to disturb the shape of your rest. It goes on without drawing you downward to it. You remain above, in the warmer air, in the lavender. The light has reached nearly everywhere now except the deepest corners. It lies in long bars across the old floorboards, showing the narrow seams where loose straw is tucked, the worn grain, the slight bow in one plank near the wall. Dust does not rise, it only sits where it has settled, visible for a moment when the angle of sun finds it. The boards have stopped creaking as they warm. If you open your mouth a little on the exhale, you can taste the lavender more distinctly on the air. Not as sweetness exactly, but as a dry blue flavour at the back of the tongue, mixed with wood and hay and the faint mineral memory of the pitcher by the ladder. Your breath lengthens without effort. In, the warmed scent of flowers and boards. Out, slower now. In, the moving air from the doors. Out, and the linen settles more closely over your legs.
The details begin to blur together. The doors are still open, but they are also just brightness and air. The bundles are still overhead, but they are also simply the scent around you. The shutters below are only a remembered patch of faded blue in the shape of the barn. The sickle and basket remain by the wall. Even that far-off note, already gone, leaves behind only a little more distance in the fields. Another small breeze enters the loft and passes through the hanging lavender and over the